A very warm welcome to all of us, to you all in joining us for our fifth installment in the interview series conducted by the College of Chemical Sciences. These interviews are produced by the Media Circle of the College of Chemical Sciences, and they are here to highlight the incredible journey of prominent scientists and in the field of chemistry in hopes to inspire young emerging chemists. So I'm Jayath Silva, a fourth year student from the College of Chemical Sciences. And today we have with us Dr. Alejandra Palermo from the UK for this interview. So a brief introduction about her. She graduated as a as a chemical engineer with a PhD in material science. And currently she works in the field of policymaking in the position of the head of global inclusion at the Royal Society of Chemistry. So it's really nice to have really nice to have you with us, madam. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and being with us here today.
Thanks to you. Thanks to you very much for inviting me. And I feel honored to be here and to be considered by you as a successful person. It's just absolutely amazing. It's a great honor to be here. Thanks.
Yes. So I guess, so to begin, could you tell us a little bit about your childhood, your upbringing and what your education was like?
Okay, well, I was born in Argentina, Latin America. So probably a very different type of education. I was brought up in a small family. I have a sister, mom and dad. And it was a loving and very caring family. My origins are quite humble. My parents worked really, really hard to provide us not only love, but also the things that you need. And also my family really consider education very highly. I am the very first person who went to university from my family. But I have to say, I did it, yes, but my family was always behind this. My mother supporting me, and every time I have a failure, because, there are always winners and, losers at any time. And I have some meetings where some exams that it didn't go as well as I wanted to. And I was really getting upset about the whole thing. And my mother was always there saying, well, you can do it, you can make it. I remember once when I failed the exam in the first year, which was for me so difficult to understand that I could fail an exam. I came back home and I was in tears, of course, like many of us, when we fail in something, we cry. Well, I do. I cried. And my mom sat next to me and she cried with me. And that was the way that we were brought up, my sister and I, with the support and encouragement. My father always wanted to go to university, couldn't do it because they couldn't afford that. And so he always thought about education as a way forward. And I was brought up in a school, which was an all girls school. So it was a very different environment and quite a Catholic school, all girls, primary and secondary school. And then I decided to go to engineering because I really like science. I really like maths and science, and I really liked as well literature. So it was a bit of a mix, but I decided to go to chemical engineering. And of course, when I went there, majority were men, and was less than 10% undergraduates, female undergraduates. At the time, I didn't think about too much. With time, when I was working through my career, I always noticed you are a minority in many different ways. Majority of my colleagues went to mixed schools, which is the most common thing in Latin America. And I went to a school where everyone was a woman, including the teachers. So it was a very different environment, but a supportive environment. So I think I was very lucky. I am where I am. I am who I am because the support I had.
Yes, so that's a very, that's a very relatable story. I guess a lot of young girls, can relate to that sort of experience in school. So after you graduated, you have held many roles throughout your career, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So from being an assistant professor, and now you're currently at the Royal Society of Chemistry. And so out of all those roles you played, what what did you learn from each of those? Could you share a little bit about what you learned from each of those roles you played, and how have they, influenced you as a person right now?
Gosh, that's a difficult question. Well, when I finished my first degree, I started my PhD in Brazil. For personal reasons, stayed there for a couple of years, and then I had to return. So I learned a bit more about how things work in different countries. Brazil has a different language. I was brought up in Spanish. Brazil is Portuguese. And I learned a bit more about how things work in a different environment, which I thought it was very positive. I was very early in my career. And then I always wanted to be a researcher. So when I was on the second or third year of a PhD, I was absolutely convinced that was it. I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to be a senior academic, the most senior I could get, and have a research group. I wanted to be what my supervisor, whom I really admire, I wanted to be like he was. He was a great guy. And then something appeared in my career, an opportunity to work with the UK, and it was a fantastic opportunity. So I came to the University of Cambridge for a fellowship, which is a very prestigious fellowship, to work for a year. And I also have a grant to collaborate and come and go from Argentina to the UK. So it was where I was in Buenos Aires to Cambridge University, and I enjoyed that enormously. And then I decided to stay here. There were lots of opportunities. I made my life here, and I stayed. Never planned. It was just something that was going on. It was going on, and then I moved into that, and I accepted. And I learned a lot because I really loved my teaching. And when I was in the UK, it was one of the things I missed, because I wasn't really teaching a group of students. I was having tutorials with the people that I was working with when I was more senior into the research associate in the university at the chemistry department. I'd of course had PhD students coming to work with me, and I was supporting them and working together. So you had that sort of training with others, but I didn't have the undergrad cohorts, which I used to have in Argentina, and I loved it, and I missed that. But I carry on working, and the topics was really interesting, and I was successful, and I think I was successful. There were not many opportunities for me to progress in my career, and I realized that unless I moved in again, and that because I was in a stage in my career where it wasn't easy. I had my 2 children at the time. It wasn't easy to keep moving. So I started to look, what else could I do? And it was an inflection point in my career. I said, what should I do? Look at the past, it's really good. I will miss teaching, but let's try something else. I will go back to teaching. I will go back to being a professor, but I need to have time to do that. And then something appeared in the Royal Society of Chemistry, a role as a program manager. I applied. I didn't get the job, but they offered me something else. And it was so good. It was absolutely amazing. I learned so much. On the first month I accepted the job, I thought, gosh, this is for me exactly. This is just what I would like to do. And I never thought it was going to happen that. I thought, I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to do something different. And I'm going to come back to research and to become the senior professor I want always to be. But when I started to work in the RSC, the opportunity, my job was evaluating how good the chemistry departments were in the UK, do an analysis, a report with a group of very senior scientists. So I was like the coordinator for that analysis, that report. And I had the pleasure to work with Professor George Whitesides. I don't know, I might not tell you anything because he is one of the senior chemist we have. He's based in Harvard, in University of Harvard. He's a fantastic person. And I work with him and many others. And I work with Ramesh Mashelkar in India. So lots of really very senior people. And I learned so much about the landscape of chemistry across the world. So I was working with India, whom I never worked before. I was working with the United States very closely. I was working with Europe, with Australia, with Africa, so many different places. And I learned so much and I loved it. And I opened up to so many doors that then I started to work in the different careers in the RSC. And what I loved from my career at the Royal Society of Chemistry was that it was always keep changing. I don't know if it was kept changing because that's what the RSC wanted me, but it was me finding the opportunity to keep changing. So you have to have an employer that gives you opportunities, but it's also up to you to see how you see the opportunity to keep growing and keep changing. I could not be doing always the same.
Right. Yes, it's like it sounds like you had a really, really dynamic career at the RSC, always
Yeah.
always changing and adapting. So when you like when you have all these changes and things that you need to adapt to, what are the challenges that you faced, and is there any advice you could give to people, on how they can adapt to such changes in order to progress their careers?
Oh, I don't know if I can give advice. I can tell you what I have done. It worked for me. It might not work for everyone. I always put my head down and keep reading, keep understanding, keep learning. And so when, for instance, when a good example is when I was working, after a couple of years, I was working in the RSC, they asked me if I could manage or the development of a network in Africa, the Pan-Africa Chemistry Network. At that time, of course, I knew a lot about Latin American chemistry or chemical engineer or science in general, US, because I had been working with the United States, Europe. But I didn't really know much about Africa. And so I just put my head down, and because I wanted to really understand Africa and science in Africa, and keeping the bigger picture. So I really dedicated a lot of time in the evenings to read about the culture of Africa, the history of many different countries in Africa, because Africa is a continent. And they're so diverse. So learning about the different countries, and particularly the countries where I was supposed to be working, and visiting and talking to people and talking to colleagues in Africa, learning from them. And of course, talking to my manager and seeing how we can progress and understanding what opportunities. So so my job was helped creating this network with the support of the chemical sciences in Africa and scientists in Africa, and of course in the UK and elsewhere. But I expanded that into a fully as best as I could to understand how people were thinking in Africa. What's the story? What's the things behind? So I always take it a little step further, and that helped me. But perhaps as an advice is, don't think that mountains cannot be climbed. They can be climbed. You can maybe at your own pace, but ask for help. Don't be concerned to say, I don't know this. And I think it's the best way forward. If you think that you feel concerned about saying, I don't know, how do I go about it? That's perhaps not the positive thing. It really is good to say, I don't know, can you help me? Can you advise me what to read, what to do, who to meet? Look at opportunities. There are always lots of people, majority of people that really want to help others.
Yes, yes, and also, Dr. Ale, what you said about learning about Africa, because a lot of people, I think they feel that Africa is very homogeneous, but it's actually so many cultures, so many differences that it's incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so rich. And then I suppose, yeah, I agree with you, and you get that sort of passion about the
Yeah.
different cultures, and that's perhaps what the thread about my profession or my professional career at the Royal Society of Chemistry is getting to know about can you support the development of science and chemistry in the different parts of the world I'm working. And in particular, I'm very keen on the developing world. And very keen in working with the developing world. I feel very comfortable, I feel part of that. maybe because of my upbringing, because maybe where I was born, I don't know. There are lots of people that are very everywhere and they can still say exactly the same as me. But I feel like I feel more closely related, and I understand the issues, and I understand what I was, what I am, and what perhaps I could do to help or to support. So yes.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you very much for that insight, Dr. Ale. And I think to explore more about inclusion and diversity, we have Deepadul with the next question. So Deepadul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jayath. So Dr. Ali, so now we know that we all have turning points in life, right? So looking back at your extraordinary career path, was there a turning point or a defining moment in your work that drew you to working on improving global inclusion in science?
A woman, you said, Deepadul. Yes?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, yes. I mean, it is a difficult question, but I suppose we have the very first president of our society, Professor Leslie Yellowlees. She is still at the University of Edinburgh. I think she has now retired, but she was very inspirational about diversity. And it was, of course, the very first person who actually looked into inclusion and diversity within the society, established the Inclusion and Diversity Committee, which oversees all our activities. And she was as well the first chair, not only the first female president of the society, but also the very first chair of the Inclusion and Diversity Committee. And I had the pleasure and the honor to be working with her as a secretary of the committee, which I'm still is part of my role with the different chairs that I have. So I learned a lot about inclusion and diversity through her. In terms of inclusion, I suppose there are many different, in terms of my international work and the global inclusion, I think there are many different roles. My current manager, our current CEO, they are all very supportive about our work and allow us to take that sort of a step up in the way we were doing. And of course, within the RSC, as I was mentioned to Jayath, sorry, I was very fortunate to have, we're managing very large international programs in the RSC for many, many years. So I developed activities in Africa, I developed activities in Brazil, developed activities in and the development of the office in India. I'm working, of course, and I was never able to go to Sri Lanka. But, that was before I could go eventually. So I was working with the international community, and that connection for me with the international community was essential. So there's a sequence of things that I will say that when you put all together led to global inclusion. And if I have to think about women, there were many, but I will remember always Leslie.
Thank you, ma'am. So I really hope that you get a chance to come to Sri Lanka and to explore. Yeah. So over to the next question, ma'am. So how does the lack of inclusion and diversity affect the quality of research in terms of sharing knowledge, innovation, and networking?
I think it is very clear, and there's plenty of evidence that you could have a look at all the different reports and the different analysis and how the lack of diversity or the diversity actually leads to better science and it leads to better innovation, better science, new creativity, sparks of different ideas. And if you have better science, you will have better, in the end, better businesses, and they will favor society. So there is no doubt that that happens. And you can think about it as an example, as a very simple example. If everyone thinks exactly the same, because we are not diverse, because we were all brought up in the same place, because we were all we look exactly the same thing, we all like the same from food to things that we do, so we are all very similar. it's very different to have different perspectives about a different project. So when you look at a research project, when you look at a problem and you look at and you need to find the solution for the problem, it's really good to have different inputs, different perspectives for the same problem. And that's where innovation can spark. So there is no doubt that diversity sparks innovation, it sparks creativity, it's good for science, business, and society. And so that's essential. Of course, when you talk about diversity, you talk about all the protected characteristics. You talk about gender identity, you talk about race, you talk about ethnicity, you talk about religion. Well, and ethnicity is part of that. Different cultures, different aspects, disability. You talk about socioeconomic background. You talk about so many different aspects, and of course, that means about global inclusion. And one of the things that I feel that is still chemistry, it is perceived as continue to be dominated by the global north. And when we talk about global north, it's not a geographical distribution. It's about those who are more, those countries which are more developed than others. And so part of our work together is really concentrated in hearing the voices and providing a platform to hear the voices from the global south. And that I strongly believe that will lead to better science, to better, not only to equality, not only to the social justice that even absolutely needed, but is even a step further. It will give to a better society because we will have a better science, better outcomes, better world.
So thank you, ma'am, for that insight on inclusion and diversity. So it's really inspiring to see a prominent character like you. So like you speak for diversity, and that helps us to, advance the chemical sciences. So thank you for that once again, ma'am. So we have Sanara next, a fourth year undergraduate of College of Chemical Sciences. Over to you, Sanara.
So Dr. Ale, I would like to explore the RSC's contribution to global inclusion and diversity. So as the head of global inclusion, when we consider minority groups based on race, gender, or sexuality, what role does the Royal Society of Chemistry play in providing them with recognition and other opportunities?
That's a very good question, Sanara. I think that we are looking into in different ways how we can provide platforms to be, I mentioned about platforms to be heard, so that we have large initiatives that bring people from different parts of the world together. And at the moment, some of those initiatives are online initiatives where we share posters, share works, congresses, and events, which are online, but hopefully sometimes we can go into hybrid mode or face-to-face sometimes, and other times virtually. But so these platforms are, in particular, Commonwealth Chemistry presents an opportunity to bring people like Commonwealth nations across the world to discuss science and the contributions that we all can make to a better world. And in particular, listening to the voices of people from underrepresented groups. But when you talk about underrepresented groups, and independently wherever they are in the world, one approach that we had in terms of diversity is whatever we do in terms of inclusion and diversity has to be supported by data and evidence. So we collect the data, which is undeniable. For instance, if you look at gender equality, the way to think about it is, can we produce the right data to demonstrate that there is inequality about gender? That we have many undergraduates in many parts of the world, which are perhaps either equal numbers male, female, or even more women than men, but still as they progress in their careers, from undergraduates onwards, there is a huge drop in percentage of women continuing a career in chemistry for many different reasons. But presenting that data, undeniable data, shows that there is a huge loss of talent according to gender. The same you can think about gender identity. And so what we look at the data, and it's easier to have the data for academia in particular, depends on the country, but it's easier to have it in academia. And we follow the data, and then we look at the evidence. And when we look at the evidence, we look at the lived experience. We start to understand what are the issues behind different women, and we just trying to make the piecemeal about understanding how is affecting women. What are the barriers that women feel that they have to retain in a career in chemistry, or to progress at equal level as men? And so that's the approach that we have for any underrepresented groups. We started with women, then we follow up with LGBT plus community. We are now working with race and ethnicity, and we have produced a very difficult sometimes to read report talking about the exclusion or the discrimination that people who identify themselves as Black or minority ethnic individuals can be perhaps not being included in the career of chemistry, and it's very difficult to progress. And you can see a huge loss, at least in the UK. But we do know that happens elsewhere, and maybe the ethnicity is differentiated, it's different in different countries, and the minority ethnics are different in different countries, of course. But the issue is the same, that there are certain, according to the way, the race or ethnic group that you belong to, or you feel that you belong to, you may feel discriminated, or you may have more barriers than others. So presenting the data, understanding the lived experiences, and making a better picture about what the problem is, you can identify solutions. You can identify how you go about it. And this is exactly what we are trying to do. UK is for us easier because it's easier to understand the issues in the UK for us, because we have access to the data. But we are working with many partners to work together and really work on the global inclusion.
Thank you. I do think it's important to use statistical evidence to find ways to overcome these barriers. And I'm interested in learning more about that. I think Deepadul can continue.
I think just Sanara, you put it really well.
Yeah.
And I think it is essential, because when you go to someone and says, well, no, there are no problems about women really want to leave because, they don't want a career in chemistry. Well, why is that? Why do they want to leave? Well, did we ask? But this is the data, you can't deny this is data, hard data. And now let's go understand, why did they leave? Is that what they really wanted, to disappear from chemistry, study so many years and they wanted to leave? Or is it because you didn't have the support that you have, or you felt excluded, or you felt that you didn't belong to? One of the things that happened to me when I started in chemistry in the UK, when I was at the time in the chemistry department, which is many years ago, there were no women as full professors. No, there was not one. There wasn't one. There wasn't a lecturer at the time. And I was a mom with 2 children, and I wanted to be there. So you think, well, this is not really possible. And so that, that really starts to make, it helps you to do some choices, which maybe they are not the choices that you wanted to do.
That is very relatable. I'm pretty sure many women and other gender minorities have felt that way as well.
Sanara, I think I can't hear you.
Sorry, you're muted.
Sanara, you were muted. We didn't hear you earlier. Oh,
I guess she might be having a connection problem. So
yes.
So I'll continue, ma'am, from her, taking from her. So ma'am, so like having worked with different countries, from UK to Africa to different countries, is there a bridge between more developed countries and less developed countries in terms of access to resources to conduct research, and how can it be addressed?
Gosh, yes, it is a very there are huge differences between the possibilities in different. I'm actually referring to access to resources in terms of capabilities, in terms of knowledge, in terms of great chemistries elsewhere, everywhere. But the access to resources is a really serious issue. And of course, we are moving into a world that is changing so rapidly at the moment, and digitalization and this virtual world that we're living, it will really help in bringing a bit more equality about science. I believe that. I think effective networks might help in developing and in collaborations between very well developed countries like Japan or other countries in Europe or elsewhere, where you, by getting to know people in different parts of the world, and you can share resources, you can put programs together, and that perhaps is the way forward. And this is the way we consider our role in creating those effective networks, where people do know what's happening in the different parts of the world, what sort of science is going on, what sort of research is going on, and how that by collaboration, there is a benefit for both. That there definitely has to be a win-win situation in a research collaboration. It has to be a benefit for both parties. And we believe that's possible.
Thank you, ma'am. So it's really true that by collaborations we could achieve more because we can share resources and stuff. So it's really important. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So over to you, Jayath. Yeah, it's your chance.
Yes. So, ma'am, now as we were exploring about how the RSC operates and tries to address these issues about global inclusion and diversity, how do you feel about the current status quo? Because normally, policymakers, people who are in positions of power, they are always resistant to change, right? Or they are usually resistant to change, and they would like to, they are comfortable in how it is rather than in what it could be. So in your experience, do you feel that the world is shifting towards being more inclusive and being more diverse, or is there still a much more to go? And how best does the RSC address these problems?
Yeah, this is a really difficult question. I think if you ask me, I think the world is changing so rapidly, and I mentioned that before, and it's sometimes even unpredicted how that can move in the next few years. We never thought we have a war here in Europe, Russia, Ukraine, you probably heard. That was a year ago, was not, well, for majority of people, I mean, there were people that might have known that this could have happened, but majority of us didn't think that that was possible. And of course, at the same time that we are all very conscious, and there's a general way of thinking about globalization is here to stay and to increase and to never leave us. At the same time that you have the globalization, you have at the same time growing a nationalism, a closing borders, as we can see in different parts of the world. And so those two ways of thinking about the future are growing in parallel. So it is difficult to think about how that could be changed. For the RSC, from the RSC point of view, we are absolutely committed to make the world global chemistry community a reality. We have been talking about the global chemistry community for many, many years. Our publishing business is totally international, and we always talk about the global chemistry community. But when you go in depth about who publishes in our journals or in any other journals, another editorial, publishing company, you will see that the majority of the publications come from the global north. And that represents the research community. That really represents the research community. So how can we influence that? How can we provide opportunities for great talent that exist in the global south to be heard? And that's part of what we are trying to do, to really give that opportunities to go to a conference. How many times you go to, well, how many times I've been in a conference, an international conference, perhaps in the US, and you see always the same speakers. And the speakers are in majority, in general terms, they are Americans, more and more they are from China, some Europeans, some occasionally some from the UK. And that's what you hear. And what about, and perhaps you always see the same people. How good it would be to think about going to Congress and you see voices and new research that happens elsewhere. And yes, you may want to go and see someone who is very famous and everyone wants to hear that person because he has a long trajectory with many publications and long, great research. Yes, we want to hear that, but we also want to hear someone that we never met before. And that giving that opportunity, that equal opportunity at the same level, hearing from those groups is really important. And that's what we are committed to make perhaps perceived as small changes, but they will be significant in the longer term.
Yes, definitely, because usually change doesn't happen overnight, and it takes often small steps to get to the point where you want to be. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, so many times we always hear from the very accomplished individuals. We always hear about very senior professors, senior academics, they have a research group, a huge research group. Well, we should still continue to hear from them, but can we hear as well from early career chemists who are doing a great job and they are really starting, and give them a platform to hear? And then when they are presenting, this is part of creating an effective network. It's creating the opportunity to identify collaborators, because maybe someone in the audience said, oh, this is something that I would really like to continue and work with this person. I didn't know this is great for interface with my work or for whatever reason. And I think that's something that it needs to change. It's not always hearing from the very senior, just giving opportunities to at different stages of your career to be heard.
Yes, yes, thank you for that answer, Dr. Ali. And if I were to further extend that question, are there any specific goals or objectives you have in mind with regards to how you would like to see the academic environment operate in the future?
Oh, I think there's
a few maybe, or the most important.
Oh, I think there are so many different changes. I mean, an academic environment where there is a change in the culture, a more supportive, more inclusive culture. I mean, when we talk about inclusivity, it's just a key word that we need to keep reminding ourselves what it means. I don't believe that it is inclusive enough. I don't think that that's why we have underrepresented groups in chemistry. I wish we didn't have to talk about inclusion or diversity any longer, because it was already accepted and already there. But so there is so much to change. There is still unconscious biases, or perhaps implicit bias, which are not really unconscious, because I protect myself by saying, well, I have a bias, I can't really help it. They're unconscious. How can I help them? Well, actually, once you know that you have biases, investigate your own self. They do a self-analysis, investigate what actually means biases, so that you can avoid having biases, or at least you can prepare, reflect, take time to take decisions, and then help in decision making. In particular, in decision making, you can have more time to reflect and then be more fair. I think when there are bullying and harassment is another area. One of the interesting or sad things that we learned when we did an analysis about gender biases in the chemical sciences, we analyzed the data, and then we looked into the barriers for the loss of talent that we were seeing. And we were not looking, and we did a survey, and many colleagues from many parts of the world, including Sri Lanka and so forth. we had a huge survey across the chemical sciences, and unexpectedly it came bullying and harassment. It's one of the issues that many individuals, many chemists feel within the environment. So keep talking about bullying and harassment so that we know that exists, we know that we have to avoid, and know what you need to do when you are seen in front of you, either as a bystander, what you can do to support and to avoid that continue to be happening, to support the individual and to avoid that. And I think so there is a culture change that is needed, and we, all of us, each one of us, you as an undergraduates, your lecturers, your superiors, and all your colleagues, and all of us have that responsibility to make that change.
Right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that answer, Dr. Ale. Certainly, every one of us has a role to play in making the the scientific culture, the academic culture, better and more inclusive place for everyone who wishes to take part in it. And I think Deepadul has another question for you regarding open science. So Deepadul, take it away.
Thank you, Jayath. So Dr. Ali, how do you think that open science will support and advance excellence in chemical sciences? What is your view on this?
I think it is very important. It probably will be with the way that we were thinking in the future. Open science is here to stay. It will give opportunities for a more equal way and to a more ethical way of research. I think that it will provide opportunities for countries in the developing world as well. So I think it's a very positive way. There are still things that we need to understand how open science will work, how access to data and to positive, positive results and negative results will influence the next type of research, how that will be taking place. But I think it's a really positive thing, and we will see. And we at the RSC are at the moment really working on open science and understanding what the consequences could be or are.
Thank you, madam. It's really nice to hear that you, along with RSC, is working and looking at this open science. It's really nice to see here. So, Sanara, over to you for your next question.
Yes, Dr. Ale. In my experience, one of the main barriers that I faced when I was coming into like planning on joining chemistry as an undergraduate was that I lacked the guidance and the awareness, knowledge when it came to a future in chemistry. Like as a woman in chemistry and a person of color in chemistry. So are there any current opportunities or initiatives carried out by the RSC that provides this awareness or advice for career chemists like us?
Yes, we do have a great careers team, and they provide advice, mentoring, which also is very important. We can't really deny the role of mentors in our and we all I have fantastic mentors in my career. And I think it is very very important for you to see that there are so many different careers in chemistry. I mean, I think the opportunities you have in academia, but the opportunities you might have in industry, opportunities you may have in policy making, or in teaching. So there are lots of different opportunities that you may have, and knowing where you want to be is not easy. You have all in front of you. What sort of choices you have, many choices to make, but what you can do is really difficult to decide. So having support in a careers, working with the careers advice is good. So the RSC provides careers advice. So I would strongly recommend, look at our website, look at the careers team, look at the mentoring programs that we have, and they will help you.
Thank you so much for that advice. do you have any thoughts or words that you can give to LGBTQ youth coming into chemistry, the field of chemistry?
Yes, I mean, we are working with the LGBT plus community very much. We know that the environment is not always as welcoming. We are committed, and we produced a report very recently about how chemists from the LGBT plus community who identify from the community, how they feel about this, and what the discrimination that they feel, what is the environment. And one of the things that we know is that majority of them feel that they are not treated equally if they are from the community. So there are lots of things. I mean, one of the ways forward is creating small networks, support networks within the environment, within the school, within the academic environment, and that to support each other, to know how can you be stronger by having colleagues that they are going through the same thing that you are. We also have produced a toolkit which is extremely successful and extremely useful, because one of the that actually is focused on different communities. So it's an LGBT plus toolkit explaining lots of things about what the do's and the don'ts mainly, in terms of how can you support the community. And it is for teachers, it is for colleagues, it is for a research community, and so it is, and for allies. How can you become an ally? And I think with any underrepresented group, such as the LGBT plus community, what it is crucial is to have allies. So, but how can you become an ally if you don't know much about the LGBT plus community? So this, we have one of the toolkit flyers describes what actually means, what are the terms, because sometimes people are not, because of ignorance, because we don't know, we don't approach the subject with the right language even. So knowing about how to become an ally by knowing what the LGBT plus community is, what are the terms that actually are used within the community is important. So I will strongly recommend that toolkit and share with, it's free and it's to share with everyone, just to almost educate the community. And there is nothing wrong about it. It's educating the community about how to address, what are the issues and how to address the community.
Thank you so much for that inspirational advice. Do you have any other advice that you would like to give to an upcoming chemist?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, a chemistry career is fantastic, opens so many doors. I would say don't give up, stay in a career, see what the opportunities are. There are fantastic opportunities ahead. Of course it's tough, of course it's difficult. I'm not minimizing that. Of course I know how difficult it is, but it is so rewarding. You have great opportunities for a fantastic career in chemistry, and you have great opportunities to make a difference and make a difference for society at large. We cannot deny the crucial role that chemists play in solving the challenges that society globally has. If that's what the way we want, that's what we should be doing, really thinking about how chemistry helps to have a better world. So stay, persevere, is a fantastic career, millions of opportunities. Whatever is your role that you will have later on, it will be one that makes a difference.
Thank you so much. I think we can gain a lot of inspiration through your amazing career and life path. And with that, we can conclude our insightful session with Professor Ale Palermo. Thank you very much for your time, and it was an immense privilege and honor to interview you as undergraduates. We are truly inspired by your groundbreaking initiative in global inclusion and diversity within the chemistry community, and we hope that everyone who participates is inspired to create a more inclusive and diverse culture. With that,
thank you so much.